In China, President Bongbong Marcos is welcomed by his counterpart Xi Jinping in a ceremony in Beijing. It is the second day of Mr. Marcos's state visit to the East Asian giant. He also met with other local leaders like Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and Li Zhanzhu, chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Let's get the thoughts of foreign affairs expert Enrico Gloria, who joins us from Beijing. Sir, President Marcos said he eyes a new chapter in Manila-Beijing relations. So what exactly does this mean in light of the country's independent foreign policy?
Right. I think the importance of this meeting first lies in the fact that this is the first meeting for China's part after the new year, and also one of the important visits as far as China's neighborhood diplomacy is concerned. Then from the Philippines' perspective, this is also a momentous visit because it's the first official state visit of the country outside of ASEAN. Now it is pivotal or momental, so to speak, because it's kind of continuing, if you will, the better relations that we have built during the previous administration as far as restarting bilateral relations. But at the same time, I think we also have in the picture growing mistrust, especially because of the events that have transpired, for instance, in the past several months in the West Philippine Sea. And then suddenly these two countries sort of still continued with the meeting, actually still amicable in that sense. So what's also important here is, for instance, yung bilateral agreement on the direct lines of establishing direct lines of communication between the two countries. For me, that says these two countries are still working within the arena of diplomacy to actually mitigate any unintended risks arising from miscalculations in asserting our specific or our individual rights in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea.
All right, you mentioned Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so how did you mentioned the West Philippine Sea? How do you see discussions between Presidents Marcos and Xi taking place regarding the conflicts in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, certainly, I think President Marcos will assert our interest by probably invoking the arbitral award, but as we all know, consistent with the responses of China way before, it's basically insignificant for them. Having said that, at least it's expected of President Marcos to bring up Filipino national interest on that regard. But I guess what's important here is that the two countries are still talking to each other, finding new ways, creative ways to sort of mitigate the risks that we are seeing unfold, almost on a regular basis in the West Philippine Sea. And that for me is already a victory, if you will, in terms of how the bilateral relations of these two countries, despite competing national interests, still manage to evolve, finding ways to, manage the rocky waters, so to speak. Yeah.
So at least we're still on speaking terms, right? That's what you're saying. But, the military and senators have already denounced China's incursions in the West Philippine Sea. You said earlier that for them, for Chinese officials, it might be insignificant. But how do you describe Beijing's responses to diplomatic protests and the notes verbal so far?
Well, the individual protests of the Philippine Senate and our military officials were done rightfully so. But in terms of China's official response, I think they are taking note of what's happening or how the Philippines is responding to these events. But whether they are responding consistently with how we expect them to, respect our national interest is another story, right? But for me, I think they're taking down notes at the very least, and they are watching that it's, fueling mistrust in the Philippines. Therefore, you have this sort of agreement or engagement between the two countries to actually find new ways to manage this particular miscommunication, if you will. So I think I also have a sense that China, at least the top leadership from their part, are also, sort of uh, trying to manage or mitigate these kinds of events that are happening in the West Philippine Sea. Right.
So, how do you think Mr. Marcos can set the tone to further improve ties with China while maintaining the strong alliance with the United States?
I'm glad you asked that question because what was very revealing, if you will look at the press releases of official state media here in the Philippines, is the emphasis on our government's part to say that the West Philippine Sea issue, the security issues, are just one of the many aspects of our comprehensive relationship with China. That for me says that uh, Marcos administration is ready to actually bolster more positive relationship in different aspects of our bilateral relations with China. So in that sense, the priority as far as China is concerned is still exploring how we can benefit from China from an economic development perspective, especially since the priority is still pandemic recovery at this point. Now,
Well,
if you would look at U.S. alliance, on the other hand, I think what stuck with us there is the security alliance and basically maintaining the commitment to the alliance in itself. So there's varied responses, no, on both angles, which I think is the right strategy to pursue as far as Philippine foreign policy is concerned, right?
right.
So it's identifying Philippine national interests, hedging, if you will, between these two major powers.
Well, China has said that the sum total of bilateral ties should not be defined by the maritime conflict between neighbors. So, how has China proven itself on this statement based on trade and investment activities and on the economy in general?
Right. Well, China is still committed to exploring more cooperative agreements, if you will. I think there are around 14 bilateral agreements on top of private business deals in this trip that we are going to expect. No, so at the very least, China remains open and committed to ensuring that our two countries remain open to these kinds of arrangements. No, in terms of trade, well, China is still the top trading partner for the Philippines. No? Tourism, pre-pandemic levels, China was the second in terms of tourist arrivals in the Philippines. No, and we expect that to continue since China just recently, well, practically abolished restrictions for foreign travel. So there is commitment on the side of China to improve relations with the Philippines on other areas, no?
All right.
Despite these perennial problem on the territorial issue.
All right. Foreign affairs expert Enrico Gloria, thank you for joining us from Beijing.